In this video, we're going to take a look at the various cloning methods that Max offers. Now, I use the word clone and not the term copy for a reason. You see, 3ds Max actually offers a couple of different ways to make duplicates, each a little different, and each a technique that you should take advantage of using. As we get things going, what you'll notice with each method of cloning is the way that duplicate object does or doesn't connect back to the original that you used to make that duplicate. You see, some copying methods have more of an association back to the original than others. That I think will make more sense after working on a couple of different examples. This is a file you can find in the Working Files folder named Cloning Methods. Let's activate the top view, then zoom out a tad by rolling our wheel back to us. We'll then select the object, activate the Move command, and hold down the Shift key. Now we can grab the red stick on the Transform gizmo, and while holding down Shift, we'll move a copy over to the left-hand side. Now when the option box comes up, make sure that the clone option is set to copy, and then why don't we rename this object Copy. Let's also move over to the Modify column and change the wireframe color so it's more easily identified. Now back in the top view, select the original. This time, while holding down the Shift key, we're going to drag a duplicate to the right. Grab the red stick on the gizmo and drag over. For this one, you're going to want to make sure to set it to Instance. And then down near the name, why don't we name it Instance? This one too will change the wireframe color on. Okay, let's activate the perspective view, taking it full screen with the Alt-W keyboard combo. I'll then roll my mouse back so I can zoom a little farther away. Go back and select the original tube, then head over to the Modify column. If you look in the stack, I want you to notice that the name tube is in bold-faced. Now, back in your scene, select the copy. That'll be the one on the left-hand side. If you go back and look at its name in the stack, you'll notice that its heading is not bold-faced, regular case in other words. And finally, let's see what's up with the instance. We'll click it on the right. Going back to the Modify column, notice again this tube heading is back to the bold lettering. So there must be something going on with whether the lettering in the modifier stack is bold or regular case. Now let's do this. We'll return to the original tube in the middle and we'll scale it in the Z direction. Notice that nothing happens to either of the other two. Let's also try scaling the copy and the instance. So whatever this connection is that I was mentioning, it doesn't seem to transfer over when transforming an object. Scaling had no effect on either of the other objects in the scene. Neither would moving or rotating them around. No, where and when the association starts to show is when you begin changing the shape of the object. Watch this. We'll go back and select the original. We'll head to the Modify column and we'll change the height parameter. Now look what that does. Changing the height on the original also changes the height on the instance. Notice that nothing happened though back on the copy. Let's also try changing the radius 1 on the original. Again, we see some transfer or carryover to the instance, but not over to the copy. I'll cancel that by right-clicking my mouse. And this connection goes both ways. Select the instance, changing its height and radius 1. Now, if we try to do the same thing on the copy, you'll notice there's no carryover to either of the other two. So the copy is kind of like a one-man gang, protecting its territory, but not influencing anything or anyone else. Let's go back and select the original. We'll move to the Modifier column and add a Taper modifier. Now when you do, notice the Taper gizmo, the orange cage, surrounds not just the original, but the instance. So this too must carry over as far as the connection between the two. Try adjusting the taper amount and see what happens. Now, if you ever want to break that relationship between the two, do this. Select the instance, then down below the modifier stack, you'll see a row of commands. Right in the middle of that list, you'll see a little white dot with 2 black arrows pointing down to it. It's called Make Unique. Now, before you click it, take a look at the entries in the stack. Both the taper and the tube are bold-faced. Now, go ahead and click Make Unique. Right away, both entries in the stack have been changed from bold to regular case lettering. If we now adjust either the amount or the curve on the taper, look what happens. Making the instance unique has broken that connection or relationship. So the thing you want to leave with is that when you instance an object, the changes made go both ways. Now, there's a third cloning method called reference. Let's take a look at how that works. In our scene, let's delete both the copy and the instance. We'll now go back to the original, enter our Move command, hold the Shift key down, grab the red stick on our gizmo, and make an instance over on the right-hand side. We'll skip changing its name, but we will change its wireframe color. Now, back to the original. This time, holding down Shift, we'll drag a reference over to the left-hand side. Now, when the Clone Options dialog opens, make sure it's set to reference. Again, we'll skip the naming, but we will change its wireframe color. So here we go, the original in the middle, the instance on the right, and the reference on the left. Let's go back to the original, this time adding a bend modifier. Now, once added, you'll notice the bend gizmo, that little orange cage, has surrounded all three objects. Over in the Modify column, change the angle of the bend. You'll notice that both the instance and the reference go along for the ride. You can also experiment with changing the direction amount on the bend. Let's take both of those values back to 0 by right-clicking on their spinners. So it looks like whatever you do to the original carries over to both the instance and the reference. Again, we see that as a two-way connection. But watch what happens when you now add something to the reference, like maybe another modifier. Let's select the reference on the left, adding a stretch. Now, before going any further, take a look at the entries in the stack. The stretch modifier is not bold in its lettering, whereas all the others in the stack are. You'll also see a separation between the stretch and bend modifier listings in the stack. Notice also in the viewport that the other two objects don't have the stretch gizmo. Now, down on the stretch parameters, change the stretch amount. So check that out, the stretching action doesn't carry backwards. Now they'll all bend, and they'll all taper. But when something's added to an instance, that addition doesn't carry back to the others, which makes it act more like a one-way connection than a two-way connection. There's the major difference between an instance and a reference. Instances go both ways, references don't. You know, if we work on more of a real-world example, I think the benefits of instancing will be better driven home. This is a file named Picket Fence, which can be found in the Working Files folder. Over on the left-hand side, in front of the rails and posts, is a single wooden board. Go ahead and select that. Now, we're going to make some copies. Activate the Move command, hold the Shift key down, and grab the red stick on the gizmo. Let's now slide this to the right, leaving a slight gap in between. When you've got it in the position, make sure the setting is set to copy, then make 20 copies. Okay, let's render real quick so I can show you something. Up on the toolbar on the far right side, click on the Render Teapot. What I want you to notice is the original board that I had created, I applied a wood texture to. Every one of my copies is not just evenly spaced, but also has that skin applied. So anything that you've done to the original carries over to all your cloning copies. It doesn't matter which type of duplication you choose to use. Let's close that out and go back and select the original board. Now in building, I applied a taper modifier to that object. Let's go in the stack and adjust that taper. You'll notice that the only one that's tapering is the original. Now, this wouldn't work out so well if I wanted to make all the other boards the same shape as this first one. Having had made a copy, I'd have to go back to every single board and change the taper value. No, this is the benefit of instancing instead of simply making copies. Let's do this. We'll take our taper values back to 0. We'll open up the Select by Name list by typing H, and we'll select all the Picket copies. Once you've got those, go ahead and delete. Okay, this time around, we'll instead make instances with the original board. Holding down the Shift key, we'll drag a duplicate to the right, just like before. This time around, though, we'll make sure that the option is set to instance. And again, we'll make the same number of copies. This time, when we go back to the original board, or frankly any board, you'll see that changing the taper values on one changes the taper values on them all. So the instancing makes it very easy to go back and make a quick edit. I'm going to go ahead and save this up if you'd like to look at it as Picket Fence completed. The cloning commands also work just as well when using either the rotate or scale commands. Let's take a look at that real quick. This is a file named Artwork that again can be found in the Working Files folder. Let's go ahead and select the green twisty object. Now in activating the rotate command, then grabbing the green ring on the gizmo and rotating, you'll notice that we're rotating in a very uneven number of degrees. Let's change that. We'll right-click to cancel, then activate the Angle Snap command. Now you can do that up on the toolbar by activating the icon, or by simply tapping the shortcut key, the letter A. This will now allow us to rotate in equal increments of 5 degrees. Let's hold the Shift key down and again grab the green ring. This time when rotating, we'll rotate 15 degrees, then make 23 copies. Take a look at that. The spacing between each copy is now equal. Let's go ahead and render and see how that looks. Let's try one more. Before doing that though, I'll save this out as artwork completed. As far as providing an illustration of the copy scale combination, let's use a file named Wedding Cake. It's over in the Working Files folder. Now let's first select the cake layer, then go to Wireframe by typing F3. This will enable us to more easily see our copies as we scale them down. Let's activate the Scale command and hold down the Shift key. For this one, we'll put our mouse directly in the middle of the gizmo, filling in the gold triangle. Now when scaling, look below the timeline at the X, Y, and Z values. You're going to want to take those somewhere between 75 and 80%. When you're there, let go, make sure it's set to copy, then make 3 copies. Okay, now we can go back to shaded mode, typing F3. We now want to pull each of these layers up on top of the cake. Type H to activate your Select by Name list. Select the second layer. Activate your Move command, grab the blue stick, and move that layer up. Let's do the same thing with the third layer. We'll hit H, double-click on layer 3, then move that up on top of the second layer. And finally, type H again, grab the fourth layer, maybe pan down just a little bit so we can see at the top of the cake, and then we'll move that up. There you go. So that's what you need to know about making duplicates in 3ds Max. Now that you've got a grip on the differences between the various options, be sure to choose the method of cloning that best fits the job at hand. I'll save this out as Wedding Cake Completed if you'd like to take a look.